Hello there. In today's video, I'm just going to take a look at a deed of separation, a separation agreement. What is actually in a deed of separation, what issues are covered in it. Deed of separation or separation agreement is basically a private contract between the parties. These would be a married couple whose relationship has broken down. The three options open are a settlement agreement or deed of separation, a judicial separation which involves court, or a divorce which involves court. But you may not be eligible for either a judicial separation or a divorce in the first instance when you separate, and you may wish to keep matters private. So in those circumstances, a separation agreement is a good way for the parties to regulate things between them. Now, the things that you would be, looking to agree and regulate would be issues like access and custody and maintenance and property and pension rights and succession act rights and so on. So let's just take a look. Here's the deed of separation here. It's just a template. You can see that obviously it's going to be dated and it's going to name the parties here at the beginning. So it'll say also then when you were married, how many children of the marriage, where the family home is. Then there's going to be general provisions in the deed, and the very first one will be that the parties shall live separate and apart from and free from the marital control, if any, of the other. So basically the agreement will involve one of the parties moving out of the family home. In other words, that the parties will agree to live separate and apart. Now, it may actually involve the family home being sold and both parties moving out, but certainly it does involve an agreement that the parties will live separate and apart. The next thing then that's going to be dealt with will be the whole question of guardianship, custody and access. So if you're a married couple, then you are joint guardians and joint custodians. So the only thing you need to provide for in the agreement will be provisions in relation to access. So that's covered there. The next major issue then that will be covered will be the whole question of maintenance or financial payments and support provisions. Each spouse has a legal obligation to support and maintain the other spouse, and obviously both parents then have an obligation to maintain any children of the relationship. So that would be dealt with here. So there's a paying party and the receiving party, and basically you try to negotiate how much maintenance will be paid from one party to the other in respect of maintenance of upkeep of the children in particular, but also the spouses are entitled to maintenance too. Sometimes they will agree to waive it, provided the children are looked after. Another aspect of the separation agreement will be the whole question of taxation. What is the most tax efficient way for both parties to be assessed? Joint assessment is common, even though you may be separated, but you would need to get the advice from your accountant just to confirm that it is the most tax efficient method. You would also have an agreement there or provision in relation to the contents of the family home and any other items that's in the house. A big thing obviously will be property. In other words, the family home especially. What happens is there are a number of options. One party could buy out the interest of the other party and take on the mortgage or take on the loan. That will obviously need the consent of the bank though, because the bank is going to be reluctant to let only one person take on a mortgage in circumstances where they already have two people on the hook for it, as it were. The question of equity and negative equity is also a big factor. If there's no equity in the house, well then your options are pretty limited. Sometimes if there was equity, you might sell the house if you couldn't reach agreement and then just split the proceeds between you. But that will have to be dealt with, the whole question of property and the family home. The next thing then that would be provided for in a standard deed of separation would be that each party would be responsible for debts going forward. Another thing that's always provided for will be succession act rights. Each spouse have certain rights over the other spouse's estate in the eventuality of the death of the other spouse. However, most separation agreements will see the parties mutually renouncing their rights against any share in the estate of the other. Then any miscellaneous provisions, etc., will also go into the agreement. There would also probably be a deed of waiver. In other words, each party would waive the right that they have after agreeing in relation to the property, the family home. They would agree that they have no claim in the family home or in any other property going forward. Each party would sign the deed of waiver. So that's basically what's in the deed of separation. It is a private contract between the two parties. It should be negotiated either through solicitors giving you assistance, or in the first instance through a mediator, going to mediation, perhaps availing of the free mediation service, then negotiating your own agreement, and then going to a solicitor and having it implemented and drawn up and drafted as a proper deed of separation. And it will be important then later on when you, or if you go for a divorce, because the terms in the deed of separation will certainly be seriously considered, and regard will be given to whatever terms would have been agreed in any subsequent divorce. I hope this has been useful for you.